Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We have some people that are still coming in, so if you see me like clicking or doing anything on the side, it's just because I'm admitting everybody to the workshop. But I am thrilled that you are here today. Thank you so much for being here. As I said just a moment ago, especially on a Monday morning at 8 a.m., if you could please put your name, your school, and if you are a current teacher or a future teacher in the chat, and also tell us something that you're excited for this summer. So let's take a minute and connect in the chat and just kind of share some things, share a little bit about who you are, where you're coming from, and what you're most excited for this summer. And as everybody's writing, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share something that my family is so excited for. In addition to what I do with work, I'm also a mom of 14-year-old twins. And I have one of my twins, they're both in high school. They're starting 10th grade next year. And one of my twins, since the very start of the pandemic, has been talking about roller coasters. He loves roller coasters. We live right next to Magic Mountain. And one of his dreams during the entire pandemic has been to do a tour of roller coaster theme parks in the East Coast and in the West Coast. And so we would love to be able to do that right now. Unfortunately, we can't, go on this full-blown East Coast roller coaster trip. But I am very excited to say that this weekend, I am taking my kids up to San Jose, and for the first time ever, they get to go to Great America, which is on my son's top 10 list of roller coaster parks that he's been dreaming about going to. So I'm really excited that, something's coming to fruition after a long time of hopes and dreams for our kids right now, and not just for our kids, but for us too. What a strange and interesting time we're in. So let's see. Okay, I see Lizzie already said she's excited to spend some time at the beach and visit family in Virginia. That's exciting. That's fantastic. And she's a current teacher, outstanding at a magnet school. Fantastic. Thanks for being here. Anise is at Cerritos and road trips with friends this summer. I love it. And she's a future teacher. That's outstanding. I think it's going to be a lot of road trips in my family too. So I'm totally there with you. Joshua, he went to Cerritos College. He's going to Cal State Long Beach this fall. Outstanding. CSULB. It's a great school to go to. Really glad to see that. Oh, and going to Cancun on your first trip since the pandemic. Josh, I'm not sure if you've been to Cancun before. If you haven't, I can guarantee you're going to have an absolute blast. It's a great, great time. Wonderful, wonderful. Ooh, I see people are traveling to Mexico. Brianna's going to Mexico, and she's from Rio. Doug is going to be catching up on some home improvement projects. So I'm totally there with you, Doug. I literally just looked in my husband's closet, and I'm like, you need to schedule time to work on his closet this summer because it's those things that kind of stack up over the year. And the summer is really a time to kind of clear out some of those stacks and kind of start fresh. Excellent. Oh, Diana's from El Camino, ECC in the house. Diana is definitely on first day of summer break because they just finished finals at El Camino the end of last week. She's excited to relax with her family. Jennifer's here from El Camino. Lanahai, I hope I'm saying that right. La Nahaya, would you be willing to come off or unmute for a minute to tell me how to say your name properly? Because I don't want to say it wrong. That wouldn't be good. Lanaya, I hope that's right. Lanaya Horton? Lanaya, I know you're on. You were on super early today. I hope. Oh, yay, I got it. Whoop, whoop. Thank you. Thanks for helping me feel competent. I appreciate it. Excited to spend some time with friends after being vaccinated. Excellent, excellent. Jennifer Lee is currently a pre-K teacher. I love it. I taught preschool and I taught kindergarten for years. There's a lot of discussion about pre-K in our TK through 12 system and what things are going to look like in the future. So it's an exciting time. Jennifer, I'm thrilled you're here right now. And Diana's here also. Excellent. She's from El Camino. She's going to the beach. I love it. And she's a future teacher. And I love it. Jennifer just said she's looking to catch up on sleep. Chat's such a great thing. And it's really a nice way to connect. I encourage you at any time during this workshop today, feel free to put things in chat. Feel free to unmute and talk. We've got a small group. There's 12 of us on right now, which is awesome because it's a time that we can, feel comfortable to ask questions and just to have a conversation. So today we're going to be talking about behavior modification with children and teens. And it's an interesting thing. This workshop actually used to be about behavior modification and positive discipline. And I was actually given the topic a while ago, and I just thought, positive discipline, I'm not going to get into that. But today we're going to talk about behavior modification. We're also going to talk a little bit about developmental norms and some of the things that you see with children and kind of some of the times where it's really common. Like, for instance, if anybody who's on right now is working with third graders and they tattletale, that's just what 8-year-olds do. And so it's like one of those things where when you, as a teacher and an educator, the more you know the norms of kids and their behaviors and their development, the more you just realize, okay, this is a stage. How do I help them through this stage and get to the next stage in terms of their growth and development? But let's go ahead. I'm going to start my, actually, let me share screen first. I'm going to start my PowerPoint. And as I said, please feel free at any time to unmute and to talk. And this, I mean, it's going to be a lot of me talking at the start, but please feel free to engage at any time. Please, 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 please. So we're talking about behavior management today. My name is Renee Marshall. I have been an educator. Oh my goodness. I'm 47 and I've been working with kids and families since I was 16 years old. So I am now to the point where I'm over 30 years in our field, which feels so surreal. I'm sure some of my colleagues who are on right now, it feels the same way, where it's like crazy how time goes. But I love working with children and families. Even when I've been in administrative roles in my career, I've always made sure that I stayed connected with children and families through nonprofit work and through other work I've done. So I really, I'm committed to kids, and I know everybody who's on today is. Otherwise, you wouldn't be at a workshop at 8 a.m. on a Monday during summer for sure. But just quickly, who I am. My name's Renee Marshall. I'm a consultant. I'm currently working with the Los Angeles Regional Colleges through El Camino College, and I've worked with our community college system now since 2004. For many, many years, I was at College of the Canyons. And then a few years ago, I stepped away from my multiple roles at Canyons and decided to start a consulting business because my goal was to work with as many schools as possible across California and sometimes even beyond, which has been great. So I specialize in supporting education systems. I really enjoy the topic of humanizing virtual learning, and I've been doing quite a bit on that topic, both in the state and recently at the national level, which has been really exciting. I'm also really interested in this concept of reimagining education, especially as we move out of the pandemic into what happens next. A lot of people believe that we're going to go back to the way that education was. Education will never be the way it was. The way that education it was is not the way it'll be. And that's okay, but it's time to reimagine and really kind of think about what we want to keep that we've gotten in the past year and a half and kind of what we need to change and whatnot. So I also specialize in teacher preparation. I've served teacher preparation at the community college system at the campus level, at the regional level, and at the state level. And then the last thing that I really am proud of is I love being a partnership development person. I feel like I'm a puzzle maker, and all the time I'm putting pieces of puzzles together and connecting people and resources, and I love it. Just so you know, my education, I've got a bachelor's degree in developmental psychology, and I've got 2 master's degrees. One's in education, and the other one's in education and leadership studies. And basically I have that second master's degree because I was going to be a principal. And then I got pregnant with my twins and decided to not become a principal. And but it's great though, because having a second master's in leadership has done nothing but benefit my career and just my own personal development. So glad to be here today. Our overview, today we're going to be talking about child's development and behavioral development, and just some of the norms and strategies that we can use in order to help kids be successful. Just so you know, a lot of the things that we talk about in the workshop today may work temporarily, but not forever. That's our management of children and teenagers is just like identity development. You have things that work for a while, but sometimes you have things that really work for a long time, but a lot of times you're like almost like this magician where you're constantly pulling things out of your bag in terms of strategy. So something might work for a day, might work for a couple weeks, might work for a couple months. And then if it stops working, then what do I transition to next? So today we're going to be talking about just some norms, and then we're going to get into some strategies of some things that you can do that you may find to be effective and helpful. Again, at any time, please feel free to talk. Please feel free to ask questions. I do not want to be the bearer of all the information here, but I will be talking for a bit. But please feel free to engage in discussion. I want to read these out loud because I think these are incredibly powerful. Children never, ever choose the meltdown. or any anxiety related behavior in the same way that you would never ever choose to have a meltdown in front of your family, your colleagues, or your friends. A meltdown is not a choice. It's a byproduct of a brain that is not coping with something. And that brain needs to be showered with love, compassion, and safety, not punishment, fear, or shame. I share this because when I was a student teacher, I had an opportunity to work with a variety of teachers. I went to a credential program that I had some fieldwork experience in my bachelor's degree, and then I had 2 different year-long fieldworks during my student teaching. And I had one of my fieldwork teachers who literally led the class in punishment, fear, and shame. And so I had a year long where I watched that and what that does to children. In this case, what it did to 5-year-olds. It was a kindergarten classroom. And one of the things that you'll see, and everybody who's in education, those of you going into education, you can find somebody who's the most lovely person and you assume they're going to be a great teacher. And sometimes they get in the classroom and they're what I call a monster teacher. And so it's really important. And kids will remember their monster teachers like that. And I know that because I taught the Intro to Teaching class for 24 semesters. And I'd always start off the class by saying, tell me your favorite teacher ever. And you'd have probably at least 8 out of 40 students that would struggle. They went to school for kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. How many years? And they would struggle to say who was a good teacher for them, who was their best teacher. But guess what? Every single semester, I also asked, tell me about your monster teacher. And guess what? For 24 semesters, every single student in every single class could instantly tell me their monster teacher. How we treat children as educators, as parents, as people when you're in Target and Walmart and stuff like that, absolutely impacts who they are and who they become. So let's look at this little picture on the side here. Why do we put so much pressure on children? As adults, we have slow days, sad days, down days, happy days. As adults, we have days where we just want to nap and eat cake. So why do we expect so much from little people? They're still growing, they're still learning, they're still developing, they are still human. When I say little people too, please know I'm referring to children of all ages. I'm really talking about from birth to 18. And honestly, even for those of you that are college professors, a lot of what we talk about today are going to be relevant even in the college classroom. One of the ways that students and people and children can excel is when they have people who believe in them and who are willing to help them at their hardest moments. When a child's in crisis, they need us more than anything. So with that, I'm actually going to stop share for a minute because I've got quite a few slides on this deck, and I just want to have my face here for a minute, just talking to everybody. But I want to talk for a little bit about developmental norms and just some of the things that you might see when you're working with children. But I'm going to start off first by talking about developmental norms at a really young age. And the reason I'm talking about this is for those of you that are preschool teachers or kindergarten teachers, or even sometimes first, second, third grade teachers or future teachers, you'll see things happen that impact a child's behavior, and it's important to understand why. And so, for instance, one of the things, especially with young children, we have biting can be a concern sometimes, or if a child's hitting and whatnot. And usually it's a direct correlation to their language development. And so even if you're working with a third grader or fourth grader, and if they're struggling with how they treat other people and communication, a lot of times it's due to their speech. And so it's important to know, a lot of times we also perceive speech as just how we talk, but speech is not just what you say, but it's also what you understand and how you listen and how you comprehend. And so when we're talking about language development has a huge impact on behavior. Huge. I think, and it's important to differentiate when I'm talking about how a child will talk or express themselves, I'm talking explicitly about their expressive language, okay? But when I'm talking about how a child understands or perceives the information, that's their receptive language. So for any of you working in pre-K right now, say, or preschool, and say that you're working with 2 and 3 year olds right now, and you've got somebody who doesn't talk hardly at all, and they're beating up on other kids, and we're going, gosh, why don't they use their words? Why are they hitting? Why are they biting? If a child can receive the language and understand what's being said, but is unable to express how they feel about what's happening, where else will that expression come from? Right? If you can't say what you want to say, you're going to do other things to get the point across. And so when it comes to like younger children, especially, if you're having concerns about behavior of a child, one of the first things I want to look at is, what was their speech development? What is their speech development? Another thing too, we have a perception that speech development only happens in young ages. Do you know there are certain sounds that our mouth makes that we developmentally cannot form with our tongue and all like the muscles in our mouth until we're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old? There's certain sounds that are not even mastered until 5th grade. So speech is something that absolutely can have an impact on children. And I learned this early with my own kids. I mean, I come to you, I was a professor of early childhood education and a chair for a long time. And when I was at College of the Canyons, and I was a chair for one term, I should say, but I was a faculty for a long time. And one of the things that I learned was that so much of what I know from books and my education just came so much more into play once I had my own children. And so I have twins, as I mentioned, and one of my twins when they were younger spoke a lot less than my other twin. I'm not worried. It's a boy and a girl. They're going to have different personalities. There's going to have different developmental kind of like timelines of how they do things. And I got to the point though where I started getting really concerned because my son's speech was so much more limited than my daughter's. I thought, oh man, are we going to have any sort of challenge? Do I need to go see a speech pathologist or an expert or whatnot? And then I thought, you know what? I want to see if he's understanding what I'm saying. So Zach he was young, maybe 16 or 18 months. At that point, only had a few words, really a handful, probably mama, dada, up, hi, yes, no, but under 10, not many. My daughter, on the other hand, at that age, probably had about 60 words mastered, including some 2-word phrases. So it felt like a big gap. Anyways, having twins, one of the things that we did, my husband and I, is we cleared out our entire living room and made it into a kid-friendly zone. You go to those play places and the kids can like crawl everywhere and be totally safe. That was my living room. A little bit crazy, but having twins, we just decided that's what we were going to do. And so at one point I had 3 different balls sitting in the living room. There was a good one, like, almost like a kickball kind of size. And so there was a red one, a blue one, and a yellow one. So I decided to test my son's receptive language because he wasn't saying anything. So I was getting a little concerned, or wasn't saying much. And so I said, Zach, go get the yellow ball for me. And the 3 balls are clear across the room. They're nowhere close to where we are. His little 18-month self or 16-month self walks right on over, grabs the yellow ball, brings it straight to me. So I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I wonder if it's by chance that happened. Zach, go get the red ball and bring it to mom. He goes right across the room, grabs the red ball, brings it over. So then I said, and I got to tell you, I was, as I mentioned, a preschool and kindergarten teacher for years. So in this room, I also had like posters with colors and all sorts of pictures and stuff. So I said, Zach, go to the poster, show me where there's pink, show me where there's purple, show me where there's blue. Where do I find black? And I'm going through and I'm expressing the language, right? And this little 1.5-year-old baby, 1.5 years old, is pointing. He can't say any of it. And he knew all of it. He had 100% on his receptive language for every single question that I asked him. And as a parent and as an educator, it was so important for me because it was this pivotal moment where I thought, oh my gosh, he understands so much more than I'm giving him credit for. For many of you who are working with children with special needs or plan to work with children with special needs, you're going to see this as well, where you will have somebody who might be able to understand exactly what you're saying and can't express it back. And so the value of language is something as educators we need to truly understand. And we can even help kids to understand. Express yourself. Come on, use your word. You know, we always say use your words and some of those favorite phrases, but it's one of those things where we want to really encourage children as much as possible to talk and to express. The one thing with that, and especially for those of you who work with older children, you need to figure out what you're comfortable with in terms of how much expression you will allow with kids. Because if you run a classroom where you're encouraging expression, you may have kids express things that are uncomfortable to you as an educator at a certain point. But that's part of what we do, and that's okay. Lizzie, I saw your message. That sounds good. Thank you for checking in via chat. I totally appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit too about the impact of peers. You know, a lot of time when we are looking at developmental norms, we see things with certain kids and we go, oh, wait, why isn't my child doing that? And a lot of times, our peers make a direct impact on the age of the kids. Like, for instance, I mentioned to you, if it's a third grader and they're tattletaling, like that's just part of what third graders do, and it almost spreads like wildfire. Once one kid starts the tattletaling, it becomes like a classroom, almost like cultural thing for a little bit. But it's usually only in third grade, sometimes at the beginning of fourth grade. By the time that they're done with fourth grade, they're usually done with tattletaling. Unless you have somebody who is younger, who is an only child, who there's certain factors that will more likely make a child's development kind of a little bit later than others. And it could just be that that's where they are. I'm not saying it's anything problematic with it. Understanding where kids are and appreciating where they are is a huge part of what we have to do as educators. But we also have to simultaneously be looking for anything that looks off or doesn't look right. Another thing too that I often say in many of my workshops is, if your gut feels like something is off, go with your gut. Get some extra support, you know, ask an administrator that you work with or get a specialist to come in to check on that child. You know, do what feels comfortable to you. That's an important thing. But when you have it with your gut like that, you want to make sure that you go with your gut and you believe your gut, because that's one of those things that we don't always do it for some reason. Talk to your child's teacher or talk to another teacher that you work with, talk to a pediatrician or a speech pathologist or any sort of expert that you feel might be a resource to you. If you're either teaching or a parent in a preschool system and you need help, you can always reach out to people like us, and we would absolutely help you to find the resources that you need in order to help children be successful. It really, you know, we often talk about kids and it takes a village. It is totally true. We really need a village to do everything we need to do for children. Another thing I want to share also is, when kids get older, you will see those developmental norms change a little bit. And like, for instance, for those of you working with like fourth, fifth, and sixth graders, when they get to that stage where they're getting ready to transition to junior high, their friendships become so incredibly important to them. You know, when kids are little, they'll parallel play next to each other, they imitate each other, they have a good time playing and whatnot. By the time that you're going into fifth grade, your friends are your world. And so for kids who don't have friends, that can be a huge challenge. That can be a huge source of stress for them. It could be a source of lowering their self-esteem or their self-worth, feeling like they're not good enough. For those of you who are working with children in the sixth grade and fifth grade, I mean, sometimes especially, and I don't want to be gender specific here, but a lot of times our girls will go through puberty before our boys. I'm literally living that in my house right now with a boy and a girl who just finished ninth grade. And so those girls will have stronger, more intense friendships than you see the boys having at this age. And that stronger, more intense friendships can absolutely lead to drama. And that's just part of the age. It's like I said, these things are okay. It's just sometimes it feels like it's a little bit weird that we're talking negative. I don't mean to like imply that it's negative. Drama, friendship drama in fifth and sixth grade, totally normal. If you are working with a kid or a class and they don't have it, you're lucky. But if you see that this kind of stuff is going on, don't feel like it's something wrong with you as the educator. It's really important to know developmentally what to expect from children. So that way we don't take it on like it's us. I want to share, let me pop out real quick, I want to put something in the chat too. There is a resource that I absolutely love. It's a book. Oh, actually, I have it on my slides. So let me go back to my slides. I normally don't have it on my slides, and this morning I was like, oh, I got to put this on my slides so that way they have access to it if they want it. So thanks for your patience too while I go back and forth with technology. That's one of my pieces with humanizing. I used to try and be perfect when it came to like going with technology, and it's like, no, we're all just trying to do our best with this. I'm not going to try and be perfect anymore. So this book here, I have the old edition on the right-hand side and the newest edition on the left-hand side. And I know that my right-hand picture is a little bit blurry, but I don't know about you. I way prefer this picture of all these children's faces on the right than the new picture, that this vague picture on the left. But the concept of this book is called Yardsticks, and it's a book on child development where it just gives you a brief little snapshot of what to expect at all these different stages. You can buy the old edition for like $4 online. If you buy the new one, it is $24. And I will tell you, you will reference this book over and over. If you're going to be working with kids and families, and it's so great. You can go, oh my gosh, they're moving me up to seventh grade. What do I do? How do I teach? What is seventh grade? 12-year-olds. How do I teach 12-year-olds? What do they look like physically? What do they look like emotionally, socially, academically? What do they look like with all their bits and pieces of who they are? You literally take this book, you go to that chapter, you've got like 10 pages to read. It's going to give you every single thing. Well, maybe not every single thing, but it will give you so much in terms of child development and kind of just strategies of how you use or how you work with that age. And so I just want to, this is a book, I wish I could get some sort of plug out of doing this. I don't. I just believe in it because it's always been a really good resource. And so I encourage you to get it. If child development is something that interests you and you're looking for almost like, I look at it, it's almost like a cheat guide because it just gives me bit by bit, age by age. It only covers 4 to 14. But as a developmentalist, I can tell you it's one of the best books I've ever read on the market. So I hope you check it out. Chip Wood really did a great job of kind of breaking down how the different parts of a child and what they look like at the different ages. So now we're going to get into a couple concepts, please, that I'm hoping everybody will be interested in. First one is about modeling. Oh my goodness, that graphic on the left, I apologize, it's so blurry. I love the concept of modeling because one of the things that's important to note is no matter what age of people you are working with, you are always modeling the behaviors that you're hoping to have from those people. So for instance, on the left here, and I love what this one says. Also, some of the pictures that I'm showing have pictures of younger children. It's such a shame because I love these little like kind of visual representations of kind of what we're talking about. And as children get older, there's not as many visual representations of children on these kind of visuals. And so all of the ones I have are of little kids. And I just think that's a shame. We should value every age. But anyways, replace a goal of obedience with one of connection and trust instead. Children are drawn to those who they are emotionally connected to. And it says parenting here, but I mean, I got to be honest, as we're educators, we're kind of like parents in the same way. And so, or in a different way, but by parenting, not for obedience, but for relationship, kids are naturally inclined to follow your lead. So modeling is something that kids are always looking at us for. And it's really important that we are explicit when we are modeling things for our kids. One of the things that I will see us doing a lot of modeling with moving forward is social emotional development and having these strategies for our children to help them regroup and be able to continue to keep going forward even in the face of some adversity. We're going to be coming back this fall, and most of our schools in California are face-to-face. Many of them are. And we're going to see a generation of children who have experienced trauma in one form or another during this pandemic. And we're going to need to put social emotional learning at the forefront of all we're doing moving forward. Because if kids can't be whole, they're not going to learn. So we have to help them feel whole before they can get academics. That's important to know. And so I think it's important when we're talking about this idea of modeling with children, and we're looking at this concept of social emotional learning, that we're really explicit. So like, for instance, we want kids to know how to calm themselves down, how to self-regulate. That could be as simple as teaching a breathing strategy. Now, when you're teaching a breathing strategy and it's in front of a whole group, you can feel a little silly. I'm not going to lie. But when you're teaching it in front of a whole group, also, you're then modeling it for multiple people in the room. Sometimes also we need to kind of do some modeling with people one-on-one. But in terms of a breathing strategy, I would literally do it where I count, from, or I would, sorry, I let somebody in. I would literally go, oh, well, let me rewind for just a second. If I was face to face, I would hold the child's hand or have some sort of physical connection with them. Could be even a hand on the shoulder, but just some touch, because touch helps to ground people. There are times though when you touch, and if a child isn't feeling good, they might back off. And if somebody backs off, you don't go in for a touch again. You respect their space. But I like to do a touch on this one because it helps to kind of regulate. Plus it also helps to show the pattern. So I might say something like, and if I was working with younger kids, I might say, I'm going to do a breathing strategy and I want you to feel my breath. So I'm going to ask you to put your hand right here on my throat or my chest, up high, nowhere weird. And I'm going to do some breathing and I want you to breathe with me. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's breathe in deep till 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's breathe out now as I count 1, 2, 3. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. And you will literally see, as you are doing this with the child, you will literally see their body just start to relax, start to calm down. When they're touching you, sometimes they can feel your pulse. And when, I know this is going to sound weird, I'm like a total hippie, so don't be surprised by this. But when our pulses and stuff, like when we can connect and get in sync, it helps somebody. Like for instance, I mean, just so you know, when children are first born and sometimes when they're struggling, if they don't have to go onto machines, often if a baby's still struggling a little bit, they will directly put that baby on the parent's chest, skin to skin, to get the heartbeats going in sync. So there's really some value to it. Another thing too is counting backwards. When we count backwards, we are showing kids that it's okay to take a break, to walk away from something. I can see you're so angry right now. I can see, and it's okay to model it. I see you're so angry right now. Let's go ahead and take some angry steps as we walk around the classroom together. And maybe they're hard, angry steps. You know what I mean? But you're still walking it out. You're still counting. You're still getting something that's going to get it out. You want to get it out as much as possible. Another thing I like to do, and this can be really helpful when working with older children, is visualization. But you have to model it. And I know all of us have been in different trainings or in classes over the years where we've seen it happen and we're like, are people looking at me? Yes, assume that somebody is looking at you, get over it. Okay? Because when you're going to be in a classroom, or for those of you who are in a classroom, you always have eyes looking at you and you just need to be okay with it. And so we're going to do a visualization. Go ahead and close your eyes. Let's think about laying on the grass on a big hill. Can you feel the wind blowing, hitting your face? Can you feel the sun beating down on your skin? How does that feel to you? Think of some words that you're going to share with us later. Visualization, I'm not going to lie, every time I do it, I feel kind of cheesy doing it, but it's really, really helpful. It's really good in terms of teaching strategies for self-regulating. How many times are you angry at something and you literally close your eyes and take a breath to regroup? As adults, we do it all the time. I think about when I'm driving. And if you've got somebody behind you that's kind of engaging in road rage or something like that, you don't want to get into that. And so you stop and you take a break. You have your strategies that help you regulate your body. Our breathing. One of the things I love to do also in terms of helping children to regulate is by modeling our 5 senses. One of the best ways to ground is when you just stop and you say, okay, tell me what you see. Tell me what you hear. Tell me what you can feel, what you can touch. And it really can help a child, even if they just ground with one item. Tell me what you can see. If you are somebody who struggles with anxiety, if you are in a moment of anxiousness and you can just see the horizon, if you can physically see the horizon, and I'm pointing right now because if I open my window, I could stop and see the horizon. You can't even imagine how just stopping and seeing the horizon will almost instantly ground you as a person. So why aren't we teaching that to kids early on? You know what I mean? Like, and especially with this pandemic and what we're coming out of, man, our social emotional learning strategies, like it has to be all the time in what we're doing now. So, and if social emotional strategies are something that would interest you guys, like if me getting into like the breathing and all that isn't too much, let me know because I can tell everybody on our team, hey, we want to do a workshop that focuses specifically on self-regulation strategies, you know, breathing, meditating, yoga, whatever we want to talk, you know, whatever brings people down, fidgets, there's all sorts of things in that area. I love this little slide on the right, even though it's a little bit blurry right now. Children are great imitators, so give them something great to imitate. That is really the truth. Okay, now this next piece I want to get into is diversion. Now, diversion is, I love this. It's this little kid on this picture, but guess what? Diversion is at every single age. Even us, no matter what age you are right now, we could absolutely use diversion as a behavior modification technique with you, and it would work, or usually works. But the idea is, well, and I'm going to actually, let me read this one real quick before I get into what diversion is. I think this one is powerful. Children's emotionals are as real as yours. Just because they might get sad over the color of their cup, it does not make their feelings any less real. And I love that because sometimes we get frustrated over things like, why does it matter if you want the blue cup? A cup is a cup is a cup. I'm going to give you the yellow cup, right? Because we want to be in control. Guess what? They want the blue cup because they want to be in control. And children are in control of so few things that the more that we can give them control over, the better that they end up feeling about who they are and who they are becoming. And the more likely they are to be able to handle like harder things later on. Remember, everything we're doing with little kids and teenagers as they're growing up, in terms of behavior modification and in terms of self-regulation, the idea is when you get older and the big stuff happens, have we taught you enough that you're going to have the equipment to deal with it? You know, when you're young, it's a disappointment because you're not given the right color cup, or you're not allowed to play with a toy, or you're having a hard time getting along with a friend. When you're older, it becomes really hard things like you have somebody that dies or somebody that's terminally ill, or, you know, these heavy, heavy things in life. So when we teach these small things later on, they help us with the heavy, big things later on. And so it's really, really important to know. So diversion is one of my favorite strategies. I've used it all the time. I literally am using it right this minute as a parent in the other room. I'm going to get into that in a minute. But the idea with diversion is you divert the child away from whatever they're kind of like focusing in on. So it could be, for instance, that you've got two kids and they are fighting over, maybe they're fighting over a toy. That's a perfect one. Two kids are fighting over a toy and they're not going to figure out a way, or it seems like they're not going to figure out a way to work with it together. So a lot of times people will go, well, you two, you can't play with this toy, so we're going to get rid of this toy and go find something else to play with. Well, they want that toy. The power and the control, everything kids are doing is about power and control. Everything we are all doing is about power and control, just know. And so when they can't get the toy that they're fighting for, then suddenly that power and control, it like becomes in this out of control spin. But here's the thing. There's a way that you could take that situation and divert it and then not have to worry about it. First of all, you could do a diversion where you just pull them into another activity, something that's engaging and fun, and you get them engaged in something else. Divert them away from what was, you know, frustrating them and what they were fighting about. Another thing you can do too, and this is something that I like to do, and not everybody agrees with this, but I like to do timeouts. And I'm not a big person on timeouts with children, but I think like if two kids are really fighting over this turtle, because he's special, he's like a soccer turtle, right? This is the kind of thing where they get it at a store or they get it in one of those little machines and then they value it, right? But say they're both fighting for this turtle. Okay, the first thing you want to do as an educator or a parent is just throw the turtle away to throw the fight away. But the reality is, it's not really about the turtle, it's about the control. So, what I like to do in terms of a diversion with children, if they're fighting over this item, I'm not going to say that the issue is on the kids. I'm going to say something to the effect of, wow, it's such a bummer that you both are fighting over this turtle. It seems like your turtle needs to go on a toy timeout right now. I'm going to put him right up here where the kids can see him, but not touch him. And then you let me know when you think he's ready to come back out and play with both of you or play cooperatively. So here's the best thing. Number one, you're diffusing the situation because the kids are no longer fighting. You've moved the turtle out of the space. But guess what? The turtle is still right where those, well, I shouldn't say you've moved it out of the space. You've moved the turtle out of their hands. And so then the turtle's right where they can see it, but they can't touch it. So what that means is that the kids are trying to deal with the situation they don't know how to deal with. You've now intervened and diverted their attention, put the turtle up in a space where the turtle's on the timeout, and then you've gone back to the kids and given them the control to say, you let me know when the turtle's ready to come out and play cooperatively. So it's not about shaming the kids for fighting over a turtle. It's not about putting kids in two corners or making them go on a timeout because they don't know how to share. You just divert them from it. And then once they have the control, you would be shocked. First of all, the best thing, the younger they are, the longer they will stare at this turtle. And they will literally like stare at it and be like, you could go over and say, do you think it's time for the turtle to come out of timeout, the toy timeout? And they'll go, oh no, I think the turtle needs another 2 minutes. I mean, kids love that control. They don't control much in their lives. And so when you can give them control, you're going to see, guess what? At some point, they're going to come back and say, the turtle's ready to cooperatively play with us, or the turtle's ready to play with everybody. And then guess what happens? They've controlled the situation. They've modified their behavior with the help of an adult. And now they're back playing with the turtle and usually playing cooperatively with the turtle. And so diversion is a strategy you can use all the time. And it's one of the best strategies we can use at all ages. I'm going to be honest too. I mentioned that I'm doing this with my own kids right now. We are having an imbalance of technology in my family. I don't know if anybody else can understand what that feels like, but I have 2 teenagers that just want to be online all the time. They want to be with their, on their phones and on their computers. And I'm like, you know what? I use my phone and my computer for work, and I do use it. So it's a tool for me. I do use it for socializing too, but you can't be on it 24/7. It's not healthy. So literally, I said to my kids, your phone use right now is not healthy. We're putting your phones on a timeout until you guys are healthy with them again. And so what does that look like? I didn't have time to make a slide of it, but I quickly took a screenshot because I'm a big believer in walking my talk, and I don't want to tell you something that's not true with my own children. So I'm hoping that you guys can see this. This is what tech timeout looks like at my house right now. Their phones are not in their room. The phones are plugged in to a shared charging support in a shared space where the kids will walk by them repeatedly during the day. But here's the thing. The kids know at this point, they tell me when they're ready for them. I've just had to tell them that they're not balanced right now. And so now they have the control. And you know what's so good? My own children have now been conditioned to understand that by me saying there's no balance, one of the factors with that means that they need to go do some chores and help around the house. So I'm going to come out. I have this meeting, and then I have another one back to back, and then I have a little break before my next 4 meetings. And when I come out during that break today, I'll bet you $10 that my kids will have like 5 to 7 chores done. And that's when they'll say, hey, is it okay if we use our phone now? Because they know that if they've shown work in another area, or they've read 5 chapters, or they've created an artwork, or they've done some sort of STEM or chemistry or something, or painting, or they know that they will know that if they've showed me something else, I'll be way more receptive to saying, oh yeah, it sounds like you guys are ready for your phones. And so you really want to find a way where you kind of like pull children away from the situation that's causing an issue at times. But then also how to let them navigate back into it when the situation has changed a little bit. So does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions or clarification on that? Because I know that's a little bit kind of different of a topic there. Okay, it looks like we're good. If not, just chime in at any time. Another concept that oh, great, I got a thumbs up. Whoop, whoop. Thank you, Brenda. One of the things I also want to talk about too is the concept of intrinsic motivation. Again, it's a young child on the picture, but I think this one's a really good example. It says here, if the goal is to grow children into strong, independent adults who make good life choices, then why aren't children permitted to start making decisions for themselves while they are young and the mistakes are less detrimental? I absolutely 100% agree with this. If we want people to be intrinsically motivated, they need to be able to take chances and take risks, and you can't just live in a plastic bubble where you're constantly protected all the time. That's not healthy. So as an educator, I would look at this. If I was teaching, my infants and toddlers, I'd look at this toddler and I go, okay, what is the threat in this situation? It looks like it's a girl. I could be wrong though. It could be a boy with longer hair. I'm not sure. So it's a child who's climbing up. They have strategically figured out that in order to reach the height they want to reach, they need to flip their big wheel over so that way they can increase their height. My guess would be that this child is going for that cup of water. I don't know for sure because there could be something else up there. So the first thing I do is I look at this and I think, is there risk? Absolutely, right? Child's on a big wheel. What's going to happen? What's the worst case that could happen here? Would somebody be willing to unmute and let me know your thoughts? What's the worst case scenario that could happen to this child here?
They could slip and fall, I'm thinking.
Absolutely. They could slip and fall. And maybe if it's a bad fall, let's imagine that she or he hits their chin on the top there and bites into their tongue before they fall, right? Just so everybody knows, anytime there's any sort of cut in the mouth, it will bleed like it is the worst cut of the person's life. And it's usually like yay big. So always know if blood's coming out of the mouth, get it cleaned out as soon as possible because you will be shocked how small the cut is, the amount of blood that comes out. So, okay, so worst case scenario, maybe falling, maybe in some sort of fluke would break a wrist or break a foot or break something. Most likely would fall from that and be just totally fine though, right? Most likely. So I'd look at that situation. I'd be like, you know what? That's enough of a situation that I'm going to let that child take the risk. Because if they get hurt, then they know that what they did was a consequence of what they set up there. But they're not, most likely would not get very, very hurt. We don't do that. We don't do this with children. We let children, we're constantly watching children and trying to safeguard it so that they can't fall and that they don't slip and they don't get hurt. And not that we want children to get hurt, but when we take away failure, we're taking away intrinsic motivation. Part of intrinsic motivation is you fail, you get up, you dust yourself off, and you keep going. Intrinsic motivation would be this little child completely wipes out, and guess what? They get back up on the big wheel, back up climbing because they want what's on top no matter what. And we really want to keep this idea of intrinsic motivation going because the more somebody can be motivated by themselves and by their gut, the easier life is, honestly. I wish I had that motivation constantly myself. I don't. There is something, though, that I want to share related to this. Oh, goodness. See, this is what happens. I added a couple slides this morning and I would put some things on. I apologize. I shouldn't have. I normally just have a slide that says love and logic without the visuals. And I apologize that these ones are blurry. I will fix it after this workshop. Sorry. But I wanted to add this reference, Love and Logic. Love and Logic is a fantastic series of books that is related to intrinsic motivation and how we give natural consequences for children. So it's this idea here that they have. Adults will set limits without anger, lectures, threats, or repeated warnings. So you may give one warning, but you're not going to say it over and over. You're not going to say, if you stand on that big wheel, you're going to fall. If you stand on the big wheel, you're going to fall. If you stand on the big wheel, you're going to fall. That's not what love and logic is. It is either letting the child do the risk and you stepping back and watching and waiting if they need your help, or possibly making one comment. There's a chance you're going to fall. because you're not saying it with like judgment. You're just saying, hey, FYI, there's a chance you're going to fall. And then it's up to that person, that child, that teenager to decide if they're going to take that risk or not. I think about one time that I was with my own kids and we were at, what is it called? Oh my gosh, Kids Space in Pasadena. And for anybody who's been to Kids Space, if you haven't, please go when you have a chance. It's really, really cool. They have this huge outdoor, it's like a wooden water wheel, and it's got this huge, not huge, I mean, but for kids, it's huge, like this riverbed with all these different rocks. And here's the thing. They let kids climb up and down the riverbed, climb all around the water wheel. That's the intention of it. And it's this beautifully like it's this space that has sharp rocks everywhere, sharp slippery rocks. And it was one of those things where as an educator, you're like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't let my whole class of 30 kids on here. But as a parent, I'm going to let my one child, because I can watch one safely. Maybe I would have, you know what, if I was teaching kindergarten, I probably would have let 20 kids on there, honestly. Especially if I had a couple parents with me that were helping and supporting. But I watched as my own son decided that he was going to climb up this wet, slippery, rocky area that was allowed. It was allowable. And so one time I said, Zach, you might slip. And he literally turned around and said, okay, Mom, thanks for letting me know. And then continued to climb. And guess what? He climbed the whole thing all the way up to the water wheel and he never slipped once. Sometimes with children, we put our stuff on them or we assume that they're not going to be competent. Love and logic reminds us that children are competent and gives us tools and strategies of how to work with children. Also, just so everybody knows, there's a Teaching with Love and Logic, there's a Parenting with Love and Logic book, there's a Love and Logic with Early Childhood Education, there's a Teacher Training Love and Logic book. I mean, it's really, really a great, great resource, and I hope you have a chance to check it out. But really, this idea is, how do we have that or how do we help to kind of cultivate that intrinsic motivation with somebody? Now, I'm going to be honest though, not everybody's intrinsically motivated. And I'm not going to lie, because I love extrinsic motivation also. Now, here's the thing. As educators, I don't know what it is, but I feel like we're supposed to tell everybody that we're not supposed to do intrinsic motivation. And let me give you an example. Extrinsic motivation is like awards. It could be a consequence. It could be like you have a treasure box in your classroom, or you're doing some sort of system with your high school students where if they get a certain number of tickets, they're going to be eligible to take away a homework assignment, or things like that. But the reality is, I think extrinsic motivation is okay, because in this life we have a lot of extrinsic motivation. Sign up with this car company. I'm looking for cars right now. Sign up with this car company, you're going to get this bonus. Sign up with this group, you're going to get this. That's part of marketing and what life is like. So to me, though, I think that extrinsic motivation, I just try to keep it to a minimal, because if somebody is constantly feeling like there's going to be an outside force coming in with things for them, then it becomes almost like entitlement. And so you never want your primary behavior modification system to be about extrinsic motivation. You really should think about, who am I as an educator in terms of my management with kids, and what are all the pieces of my management. Extrinsic motivation is like one little circle on the side, maybe a piece of what you do, but it's not your totality, not at all. But I also don't want to get rid of it, because somebody like me, I loved having a treasure box in the classroom. It didn't matter if I was teaching sixth graders, fifth graders, kindergartners, first graders, preschoolers. I personally loved it because I love to shop and I love goodies. And I created a system where the kids, if they, this might sound silly, but I would give tickets all week long. I literally had these rolls of tickets. I'd be like, oh, you're being a good friend. Here's 5 tickets. Oh, you helped out so-and-so. Here's 5 tickets. You did whatever. Here's a ticket. They'd be like, Miss Marshall, can we give him a ticket because of whatever? Absolutely. Give him a ticket. I don't care. Some kids would go into the drawing. We did it every Friday for the treasure box. And I'm thinking specifically about 5th grade. Some kids would go in with like 20, 30 tickets on Friday during our extrinsic motivation time. And what I would say to them, once again, putting it in their control, because so much about this is control, everybody. One of the things I would say to them is, if you get picked once, come on up and get whatever you want out of this treasure box. If you get picked twice, same thing. Come on up and get whatever you want out of the treasure box. If you get picked 3 times, oh, you're really lucky then, because that means that you get your first 2 yourself, and on that third one, you get to pick any person in the whole class to come up to the treasure box. So right there, that becomes like a different type of motivation for that child, because suddenly they're in control. Suddenly they're in the position where they can say to somebody, oh, I want so and so to be able to come up. And when kids can be in control, man, it makes such a huge, huge difference to them. So it's one of those things where if you can do that, if you can find a way to do it, because it makes such a huge difference and kids just love it. And here's the thing, I mentioned that some of the kids would have like 20, 30 tickets in there. I'm not going to lie, there are some kids that would get picked 5, 6, 7 times. So they'd get 2 items, and then they would get to call up 4 or 5 other kids to come up to the treasure box. One of the things they would tell me over and over is it was more important for them who they got to pick versus when they got to pick themselves. And that's a big deal, right? And so it's interesting when you can use extrinsic motivation to create intrinsic motivation with kids. So as I said, a lot of people in our field are against it. I'm not going to lie. But there are others who are not. And it's really important as an educator, you need to figure out what's going to work best for you. That's the reality. So any questions or comments about this at this point? I want to make sure I get quiet for a minute. So if anybody wants to say anything. Okay, let's keep going. If at some point, if somebody says something and I miss it, or if they put their hand up or something, just everybody else let me know, because I don't want to miss anybody. Now, I like this. This is also something that some, especially early childhood educators, may disagree with. I am a believer in encouragement. I actually even like praise. And that's something in our field that a lot of people have some negative things to say about that. But I don't personally. To me, and in my learning, when somebody says something positive to me, it motivates me. And so therefore, since I know it's effective for me, I want to share it as a strategy as well. I love this little handout. It's 25 ways to encourage. This is something I would do as an educator. I would print it and keep it on my desk or on my close area to where I'm at. As a parent, I would print it and put it on the refrigerator. And it's one of those things where it's a great resource because you can say things like, wow, we did this together. Oh my gosh, you did this on your own. This took you so much time. There's all these little things. Tell me more about it. What was your favorite part? I really enjoyed doing this with you. And it just reminds us of some of those words and some of those phrases that we could say. Oh, I love it. Jennifer put in the chat, Miss Marshall, you generously gave away tickets like Oprah. I so would have been like, and you get a car, and you get a car, and you. If I could only do like an Oprah moment like that. You know what? I kind of did, Jen. Honestly, when I had my tickets in my classroom, that's what it felt like for me. And even it's funny because some of my old students are now adults. And one of the first things that they say to me is they'll remember when we were in the classroom together and the treasure box. They literally will go, this is going to say, oh, this is going to date me right here. I ran into 2 of my old kindergartners at a local pub pre-pandemic. One of them was 21 and one was 26 years old. And the funniest thing happened. They didn't talk about treasure box that day. They were both they were arguing over which of them was my favorite student of all time. But personally, as an educator, I thought, wow, for one of them, it's been 16 years since they were in my class. For the other one, it's been 21 years since they were in a class with me. How beautiful that they are arguing with each other on which of them was my favorite student of all time. I just thought it was so sweet, and just so wonderful. So I want to talk a little bit more about verbal and nonverbal communication and the impact that this has on children and the impact it has on us, honestly. People tell you all the time different things, not just with their words, but with their bodies. And I don't know why, but we don't listen as much as we should. We listen to what people say, but we need to listen to what people do also. And so, for instance, excuse me, I'm going to take a quick drink. It's really important to watch the body language of the students that we are working with. So for instance, And I'm going to not talk about in the virtual space right now. I'm going to talk about face to face, but because we're really transitioning a lot right now. But one of the first things that you could say or see is if a child or a teenager walks in and their hands are on their hip like this, the moment somebody stands like this or like this, it's defensive. They're coming in because this when it's crossed like that, it's something kind of against the other person possibly or against the situation. When their hands are on their hips, it is often that they are trying to feel like they're in power or they're in control of a situation. And so you've got to watch like how a student looks before you talk to them. For instance, for those of you working with high school students, if they come in with their hoodie over, if their hood's covering, if their shoulders are sunken in, if their head is down, that could tell you that they could be possibly suffering from depression or something else could be going on with that. It's important to know, but it's really, really important to watch. We're getting a little feedback from one person. If you don't mind muting, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much. And there, I think we got it. Okay, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. But those nonverbal communication and the verbal communication, they are both so, so, so important for us to note, and something for us to be watching all the time. Another thing too, before you intervene with children, one of the things to think about also is our voice. Now, I say this because I have a loud voice. I'm a big woman. I'm a plus size person, so I have I'm bigger. And so when I come in, even if I'm being positive, sometimes my presence can be overwhelming, especially to small people and to small bodies. And so I have to watch my voice because if I go into a group, I want to come out there and be like loud and singing and like engaging, and it's overwhelming. And so I need to know that even though it might feel right for me, it might not feel right for the students I'm working with. And that's really, really important for us to know. Let's see. Oh, another thing too. This is another point too. One of the things that we want to teach our children as much as possible also, and this goes back to verbal communication, is we want to teach them. Sorry, the background noise keeps coming off and on. I'm trying to mute. I apologize. I didn't mean to stop there. But one of the things we want to treat them or teach them is that their voice matters. And so in terms of verbal communication with children and with teenagers, we need to teach them how they can respectfully disagree with what adults are saying. And especially for those of you that are teaching older children. By older, I mean 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and up into college. We want to help to cultivate a generation that can be expressive and that they can say, Miss Marshall, I respectfully disagree with you. Renee, I respectfully disagree with you. And here's what I want to say. And we want to find ways where we can have respectful disagreements early. So that way students understand that they can challenge us. Because, it's hard as educators, we always want to kind of give the information, but the reality is the reciprocal relationship is a lot more beneficial. And so as much as possible, we really want to encourage voice with students because voice will give them that power that they're looking for. It'll give them that control that they're looking for. So much of our behaviors really have a foundation of what power do I have and what power can I get and what control do I have. The reality is in this world, we all want to feel like we're competent. We want to feel like we're loved and we want to feel like we're heard. And so when people feel those things, they're going to have behavior modification that's like self-regulating. They're going to be able to control themselves. When people feel like they're not heard, that's when things get out of control. So you got to find these opportunities for people to express themselves, even respectfully disagreeing with us, which can be hard, but it's important. I will tell you as a college professor, I had one person not respectfully challenge me. And one of the hardest things ever is she gave out information that was wrong in the class. So I actually had to challenge her in front of a class of peers, and that did not feel good. But we talked about it afterwards and we debriefed afterwards because when things go bad, sometimes you got to follow up after, right? Or I shouldn't say things go bad, things go differently than expected. The relational side is important. And that matters for all ages. That can even be if you're with a preschooler and something happens and you feel bad, you want to follow up. That's important. I have a couple visuals here that I think are important. I don't need you to try to talk me out of my feelings. I need you to meet me in my feelings because that's where I am right now. This one hurts my heart when I read it, but I think it's such the truth. When a student throws something, hits a kid or yells at a teacher, I start with, I bet that felt really bad to lose control. They always say it felt awful. Then I ask, can we work together on ways to prevent that from happening again? 100% of the time, the answer is yes. When a child's doing something extreme, they're calling for our help. When a teenager's doing something, they're calling for our help. They need to have guides, they need to have models, they need to have adults that come in and give strong parameters, flexible, but strong parameters. And we need to always remember who we are. I think about once when I was teaching one of my college students, she was in her early 30s, and she came to me and she said, Renee, I've got to talk to you about something. My niece is 14 years old and she's going to have sex. I'm not sure if I should tell my sister because I want my niece to know that she's my friend. So what I shared with my student, I said, you're the 31-year-old adult in this situation. And if somebody underage is going to have sex and you know it's going to happen and it's in your family, you need to talk to the other adults in the situation. You're not there to be a 14-year-old's friend when you're 31. You're never there to be their friend, you guys. Don't ever confuse that. We are friendly with our students, but we are not friends with them. Not when they're in our care, whether they're adults or children. And it's important that you keep that line straight because she was in huge turmoil trying to figure out if she was going to rat out a 14-year-old, her niece. And I'm like, this isn't ratting out. You're helping her as she moves forward and becomes an adult. Think about that, that decision at 14 can have lifelong consequences and so it's important that we are always the adults. Don't ever think that you are the kids or that you are hanging with the kids or that you're their friends or that you're somehow not in the adult role. You are the adult in the situation. Don't ever forget it. Behind every behavior, there is a feeling, and beneath every feeling, there is a need. And when we meet that need, rather than focusing on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause, not the symptoms. I love this one because a lot of times we make it like it's the child or the teenager, but it really isn't. We really need to figure out what is the source of what's going on. I use that terminology with my own children all the time. And it's gotten to the point where now they use it back to me. So if something's going on with one of their friends, I'll say, so tell me the source. And then they'll go, oh, well, I think it might be because she's a middle child and she doesn't get a lot of attention. And they start kind of diving deep into their thoughts on why the behavior's coming out and whatnot. And then we talk about what we can do to make it better. So it's important to always think about it's not on the surface. What we're dealing with usually goes pretty deep. And that as educators, there's some pieces that we can have an impact on, but we can't impact everything. So we got to figure out kind of what we can do and then make those positive impacts as much as possible. One of the most positive things we can do is just consistently be a good role model because they are all watching us, whether they are in your classroom or they're down the hall. I can promise you they're watching. And that makes a huge difference. Now, actually, you know what? I think I want to go back real quick. Excuse me. I want to talk for a little bit about some ideas on how, actually, you know what? Never mind. I'm going to go to this one. I like this one. I want to read it real quick, and then we're going to go into some other ideas here. You're raising a little human with thoughts, needs, ideas, and a personality all their own. They aren't perfect any more than you and I are, and expecting perfection will only lead to conflict, not connection. When we make mistakes, choose understanding, not anger. When they make poor choices, choose guidance, not punishment. When they challenge your authority, choose peace, not warfare. Remember, you're growing a person, not a problem. That's really important to note. And there's things that we can do to help children and to help teens with their own management. one of the things that we can do, one of the most practical applications, is by giving chores and responsibilities to children, whether they're in a classroom context or in a home context. Everybody should have a responsibility and something that they're in charge of. Because remember earlier, we were talking about how the control is the source for a lot of things. So when you're back in the classroom and then, or maybe you're in the virtual space and somebody suddenly is the chat monitor, or somebody is making sure everybody's on mute, or whatever responsibility is, it feels good to have that responsibility. I think about when I was in the classroom, I'd often give some of the responsibilities to my most challenging students in the room. Especially, I'd give them certain responsibilities, like maybe Diane is having a hard time in the classroom. So, Diane, you're going to be in charge of the line this week. You're going to be in charge of bringing everybody into the class, helping everybody exit from class, making sure that the doors open. And it sounds so simple and it sounds so silly as an adult. Guess what? When you're 6, 7, 13, 15, those responsibilities make a difference because someone is counting on you for something and you have to follow through. And so it's important to give those as much as possible. Another practical application with behavior management is encouraging people to practice patience. This is something I have to remind myself of, but it's also part of knowing ourselves and knowing our behaviors is also learning that how do we wait? A lot of times kids get frustrated when they're waiting. Everything's so instant right now. Instant. When you suddenly can't get to what you need and there's an extra boundary, we get really frustrated by it. But there's certain places where we have to wait all the time no matter what, right? So for instance, if you're going in a grocery store now, we go into some and we do pick up from some, but we go into one and they usually only have one cashier open. And so we are often in a line with like 7 or 8 grocery carts. And sometimes I get frustrated, but as I've mentioned to you all, my kids are now 14. And so it's really funny. Oh, actually, we got on the freeway this weekend and the 5 is just a mess right now, the 5 South. And I got on the freeway and it's like, oh my gosh, this sucks. I can't believe how many cars are out. And my daughter literally said, well, it's just a practice in our patience, Mom. I'm like, you're right. It is a practice of our patience. You're right. So let's put on some good music. Everybody else is stuck in the same traffic jam as us, right? So let's just practice patience, practice grace, and get through it. Name it for kids. You're waiting for something in the classroom. We're going to practice our patience. You're a parent, you're in the grocery store and you're in a line. You're in a line at the post office. We're going to practice our patience. The kids are in line for the cafeteria. It's time to practice our patience. We're going to get in line to go outside to do some sort of outdoor activity with the entire school. Let's practice our patience as we figure out how to get 1,000 kids out of one building in a few minutes, but really reminding them that, that it's okay to wait sometimes, I think is healthy. Another thing too, when it comes to kids as educators, we need to find a way to not always rely on technology. A lot of times we use technology in the classroom as a reward. We use it as a punishment. As parents, I see people use it as a babysitter all the time. Pre-pandemic, I went to Dave & Buster's, which is it's like Chuck E. Cheese, but for adults, like games everywhere, like the lights everywhere, so much stimulation. And I will never forget as I walked in and literally laying in a seat, like a booth that you would be eating in, and somebody was holding a phone like inches from this child's face. Child was maybe maybe a year and a half old, 2 years old. Still couldn't totally hold it themselves and have it consistently there. And they literally were just putting it in this child's face. And I thought, oh my gosh, even if this kid didn't do anything else but just sit and watch what was happening at Dave & Buster's, that would be enough stimulation in itself for a 2-year-old. All the lights and the sounds and the people playing games and everything. And I'm literally watching as they're literally going like this, like this. It's one of the worst things we've ever done when we've used technology in this other way. We now need to really teach kids going back to technology being more about using it as a tool versus using it as a babysitter. That's really important to note. I want to share with you here. This one says parenting, and I apologize that it says that, but I couldn't find it without parenting on it, and I think it's a really good visual. Teaching our children to control themselves is far more effective than trying to control our children. It's important that we model, we don't manipulate, we lead, we don't intimidate, we support, don't shame, we encourage, but don't threaten, and we guide, not punish, listen, not lecture. You know, working with children, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it can be one of the most impactful things you ever do. Um, you know, we have such a responsibility working with kids. And one of the things, too, and I didn't mention this yet, but I want to mention it right now. One of the best strategies that we can use is by saying no. When we say yes all the time to children and to teenagers, we are literally setting them up for failure because life isn't yes all the time. Life is filled with a lot of no's. And so it's important to be okay saying no to kids and be okay and be comfortable saying that. You know, children of all ages, they're looking for guidance. They're looking for understanding. They need adults who can work together to teach behaviors and teach how to self-regulate. As a teacher, one of our purposes is to really develop and help nurture children to really become like the very best person, the very best human being that they can be. You know, behavior management, it's so worth your deep investment because when kids can learn like a lot of tools to have in their behavior toolbox, they're going to be better people. They're going to be better adults. They're going to just be better, kind of like more whole people, especially because the more tools and strategies we can use with children and teens early, the more likely that they will be able, you know, because when you're young, usually it's small things that they're dealing with. But as you get older, those emotions and those tragedies and things that happen are a lot bigger emotions that go along with them. So the more we can do today, the better people will be later. So investing in behavior modification and when you're working with children is one of the best investments you can make because it can have a lifelong impact on not just who they are, but who they will become. So with that, I'm going to take myself off a share and open it up and see what kind of comments everybody has and what kind of questions everybody has. Uh-oh. Sorry, I just clicked the wrong thing on my computer. But I just want to open it up for a few minutes and just get a sense of what everybody, you know, what are your thoughts on this topic? You know, have you used any strategies that you found to be really effective when working with children? Have you used any strategies that you thought were on the opposite of being effective when working with children? I think about one of the times I was in a student teaching situation and I had a teacher force a third grader to put her nose on a board for 10 minutes because she disagreed with what the child did. Sometimes you see things in classrooms that are not good. That was a moment where I literally saw that and I was like, oh, that's the opposite of who I'm going to become. So a lot of times what we learn when we're in a classroom with kids, it's yes, what we're going to do, but sometimes it's the opposite of what we're going to do. So, but with that, I'd like to open it up. I'd like to see what kind of questions everybody has. I'd love to hear your thoughts on self-regulation strategies. I see Josh's hand and Lizzie's hand is up. So Lizzie, why don't you take it first? And then Josh, why don't you go after Lizzie?
Hey, good morning, guys. I teach or have taught 8th and 9th grade science for the past 2 years. So I usually am working with like kids 12 to 15 and sometimes older. And I love the idea of providing children with choices because it's definitely a form of regaining their control. The best advice that I was given, especially as a student teacher, was like, make sure it's choices that you can live with.
Totally.
Yeah. So something that I think through often is like, okay, like depending on the child that I'm working with or what they want to do, like what are 2 or 3 opportunities that I can give them where they're going to feel like they're in control, but it's something that's going to have a desired effect on my end. And that was so helpful to me. And then just to add on, my student teaching was in 7th grade, but I love the idea of giving students like a role for the day because time and time again, what I've heard from some of my students who do struggle a little bit more or lack some of that intrinsic motivation is that when they have a job, they really don't want to let people down.
Yep.
Like they won't do their individual work, but if I have them working with lab partners and I'm like, all right, man, supporting everybody's ideas, they're not going to mess it up. So when they feel like they have a stake in helping out their classmates, honestly, like 9.5 times out of 10, they're going to do it. And that's been really helpful for me.
I love it. Well, too, Lizzie, I love that too, because at that age, when you're working with your junior high age, the peer view is so important to them. So I would think, in addition to not wanting to let you down, like really like, oh, I can't let my friends down, because, we were talking about how sixth grade, fifth grade, like the relationships are such key. So I love that you shared that. I love too that you shared about the choices. One of the things where I went wrong with that when I was in the classroom is sometimes I would give choices that were like great at the moment, but that weren't sustainable. So like we had this one, and this was an extreme case. And it was not just me as a teacher. He went to multiple teachers when we had him. And so we had one case with a child whose behavior was just off the charts, just off the charts. And it took a while to figure out what was going on. Of course, the source was coming from home and whatnot, but we had said, okay, like, what do you want? He goes, oh, I'd love it if you came to my football games. Okay. If you have a good week, we can go to a football game. What else sounds good? Oh, I'd love it if we could all go to sushi. It's like, oh, that's kind of a fun idea. So Lizzie, I have to be totally honest. We ended up doing the sushi once, but then it was like, we came back from it and he had been good for the week. And then it's like, okay, so do we spend $50 a week and take this kid out to sushi in order for him to have good behavior? Are we creating an entitled child? And it was really tricky. So I think it's like, I love the idea of the choices and really giving like one or maybe like two choices, but making sure they're moderate and sustainable, like you were saying. Absolutely. Josh, what did you want to say?
I have more of a question, kind of bouncing off of like the whole idea of what was it of like the verbal, nonverbal communication, and then talking about like feelings and like behavior. Because I work in the classroom and I've noticed like one of the biggest like factors or hindrances is like in specific minorities communities. That's one of the biggest things, and I'm aware of it too, where a child often has a lot of like behavior or powerful like feelings, but they don't know how to express it because at home, like I've observed their parents either like they kind of like, how do I say it? Like they kind of like scold them for wanting to talk about it or for feeling a certain way. And so when you're at school, like when you want to talk about it, like I feel like it presents kind of conflicting like information for the child. So I was just kind of wondering like what suggestions would you have or what strategies would you like suggest could be used in the classroom to kind of combat some of those?
I appreciate you saying that because there are a lot of cultural norms that if you're an outsider, you don't know them. I think about one of the first times I was teaching and I was working in a predominantly Latino and Latina community. And so my students were probably like 97% Latinos. And one of my boys, he was frustrating me. And I literally said, look me in the eye when you talk to me. Look me in the eye. I had no idea what I was doing, telling this little Latino boy to look this white lady in the eye. Like it made sense he didn't want to do that to me because if he was going to do that to grandma or mom, he would have had a problem. You know what I mean? He would have been punished severely. You don't do that in the culture. So for me in that situation, I ended up talking with the parents and I apologized. And I said, I just need to understand a little bit of your cultural norms so that way I can follow along. But in terms of what you're talking about, Josh, personally, I think that investing in the time to do community circle meetings in a classroom is one of the best investments you can do. Community circles are something that can happen either daily or weekly or monthly, depending on your schedule. But it's a time where you bring all the kids together and you bring the whole group together, and then you set group norms. Like kids are allowed to talk and to share freely. One of the things I would do is we would always have like an item. I'm trying to figure out like this, where whoever has the shell or whoever has the toy is the person that gets to talk in the community circle. Anyone can talk, but you're never forced to talk. And then it would be we would bring it up and we would have a discussion about it. So this is what happened. How could this work? What could we do to do better? This is the kind of behaviors we want in class, but sometimes it doesn't always match with what your family thinks is right. And so how can we come up with a system that's going to work for us? When you can create that community with kids and with the classroom, it can be incredibly powerful. I had a one time where I was teaching fourth grade and we had a situation come up during recess, and literally we walked in the classroom and I was like, so what should we do, everybody? I know we're supposed to go to like history right now. And one of my kids is like, we need a community circle right now, Miss Marshall. I was like, you're right. We can't do history right now. We need, like, there was an emergency in our family. We would always talk about our class as our family. I would set it up that way with my students. I'd be like, you know what? We're stuck together for like the next 9, 10 months. It's just like a family. And so once a child came in saying, we need a community circle, it's like, oh my gosh. And so it kind of set the tone for what the norms are. And when you have so many of those frank conversations with kids, and when the kids have a space that they can be frank, then suddenly the things that come out at the community circle are substantial. And it could be like, I know you want me to do this, but my mom says this, so I'm not sure. And then you can say as an educator, that was so mature of you to share that with me. It must be really hard to have a behavior expectation at home and a different one in the classroom. What can we do in the classroom for you that's going to work best for you? One of the things we're going to see in education in the next few years after this pandemic, education is going to be a lot more individualized. It's going to be like we have IEPs, individualized education plans, and special education. Anticipate in the next 5 years, it's going to go across the board. And so it's going to be like, okay, Renee Marshall, you're a kindergartner or whatever, you're a fifth grader. What do you need from us? And then there'll be conversations where we can say, this is what's happening in my family, and then this is what's happening in the classroom. I need to figure out my behavior. So we need to figure out a way that it's going to be smoother. But honestly, Josh, if you have capabilities to talk with the parents and just get a sense of what they're using as strategies. Another thing too, if you are in a situation where your school would allow for some training for parents, please know that most of the time, parents are not required to go to any sort of parenting class to be a parent. It's not like driver's ed, and where you take a test, and the moment you're a parent, you're a parent. There is no training that goes along with it unless you go get the training yourselves. And so one of the things our schools should be offering is opportunities for parents to continue learning. And so maybe it could be that there could be, I don't know, Josh, if you feel comfortable with the teacher you're working with, but maybe you could say, hey, why don't we do a workshop on behavior modification, or, how to help self-kids regulate? Because then you could bring the parents in and have them part of the discussion too. It's hard because you want to make sure that you're acknowledging people's just their history and their culture and whatnot, and being respectful of it, but at the same time moving your group forward with what you need your group to do. So thank you so much for that question, Josh. I appreciate it. We are at 9:28. Oh my goodness, we are cutting it close here. I know some of you are going to be joining us for a mentor check-in that's happening at 9:30. So I'm going to go ahead and stop our workshop for today. But I do want to. Oh, thanks so much, Mita. Excellent. Thank you. I want to put my email in chat. In case anybody needs me, you can always email me at any time. I'm education@reneemarshall.com. I do want to let you know that we have another workshop coming up tomorrow. If anybody's interested and you didn't get the notification about the workshop, shoot me an email. We've got one coming up tomorrow afternoon on Kolb's theory of reflection. And so for anybody who's a current teacher or a future teacher, learning how to be reflective is such an important piece. And so if you can join us, please do. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. I'm sorry that I've got to close it off and go to another workshop, but I greatly appreciate your time. And I hope this was helpful for you today.